Sean, good day. Hello.
Hello.
So we're dealing with Virginia Woolf, Florence Woolf, Descartes, GB News, and more importantly, we're going to do bidding prayers and Descartes, aren't we? So I know everyone very badly wants to hear about your bidding prayers experience because
Yeah,
uh, we're all engaged in one way or another.
I didn't quite bottle it, but I wasn't as subversive as I wanted to be on Sunday. But there's a good there's a good reason for that because one of the parishioners had suffered a bereavement, and I just didn't want to. I was kind
Oh,
of
do you know,
that was on my
Par-
mind.
parish life is so difficult. When I was an Anglican vicar, they just invented answer phones, and I was so excited. I love simple technology, and so I got an answer phone, and I thought, well, the important thing is to cheer people up. So I recorded a bit of Handel's Messiah, the Alleluia chorus. So you got through, and it went Hallelujah, Hallelujah, and then I edited it saying, "Hello, you're through to St Anthony's Vicarage. This is the vicar talking," and then the key change, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. It was legal message after the tone. Next key change. I thought this was hysterically funny, and then my wardens got in touch with me and said, "Yeah, but what if we're going to phoning you to tell you that Johnny, aged 11, has been run over by the bus and you need to bury him? It's not appropriate." Oh, that
No,
wrecks everything. I can't do it.
a hostage to fortune that one. But
It was.
a parishioner friend who does watch the podcast. I won't name her because I don't think that's fair. But she gave me the idea, which I thought was quite a good one, of maybe saying something about grooming gangs and that ongoing obscenity. And they made it quite. Whoever wrote the bidding prayers sort of made it easy for me because the first the first bidding prayer was this kind of universalist nonsense about not nonsense, but the universalist bit was nonsense about we pray for the victims of trafficking everywhere in the world.
Oh, right. Yeah. At
Oh, I
all
thought,
times in equally.
we're academics, psychologists.
Especially the Celtic women taken from the south coast by the North African Muslim slavers in the 8th century.
I no, I didn't go there, but I did think the thing to do here, then, Sean, is to give an example. So I said, and also, I said something like, and also the victims and survivors of organized sexual abuse here in our own towns and cities.
Very good. Yeah.
So I
Oh,
thought that was
I see. Right.
but
You got to be on your knees to follow that one. I mean, you got to be sharp on your knees to follow that one, though. But maybe people
I
did.
don't know if people listen anyway, to be honest. But then further on down, there was the usual prayer for Gaza. So I don't think they keep up with the news in my parish. I I wasn't going to say may the Lord bless Trump's new casino or whatever, or hotel or whatever he's building there.
we,
But
we we can't talk about this because it's too dangerous. And but I'd like to get in a quick 20-second thing. I'm so fed up with people with what I think of as the new strategy of the anti-Semites being calling everyone out as either or both a political or theological Zionist.
yeah,
When the issue of Gaza and Israel come up, I say I don't want to talk about religion. I want to talk about politics. I'm very supportive of the only democracy in a region surrounded by autocratic totalitarians that want to kill them. So, as far as
mm,
I'm concerned, that democracy, whatever it's called, whatever it's passed, whatever it does or doesn't have a right to do or be, I'm with the democracy. They can do what they want to defend themselves. Because I think this nonsense, nobody else has to qualify their self defense on the grounds that they think they have a right to live in the country. I mean, my ancestors got here 1,500 years ago or something. No one ever asks me if I have a right to be here when I defend myself against people who want to kill me. And I think
no,
we need to take the theology out of the whole thing and just say, for the moment, we're Democrats. We like democracies where people get to choose their government, as opposed to places like Iran, where they bloody well don't.
yeah, that's I go along with all that. But we're talking about the bidding prayers. There's no theology
I'm so
involved.
sorry I got
It's
into a rant. I beg your
it's,
pardon. Thank you for
it's,
getting me out of it.
it's cultural Marxism in a scriptural or in a liturgical setting. So I sort of did it. I kind of sort of blew up the bidding prayers, and someone did say something to me afterwards about it. Someone noticed. Uh,
Good. Well, that's kind of good though. I suppose it interferes with the calmness of the liturgy. I do the same thing when it comes to
Yeah.
the prayers in Lauds. When I'm recording the daily office, uh, there are different qualities of bidding prayer in the office of Lauds, the
Mm.
intercessions, and you get the kind of nonsensical universalism that you just
Yes.
described,
Yeah.
which you know that it's a kind of Vatican II fanatic person, probably a Jesuit, who's a universalist, and so I think we don't. This is another story about the way in which modernism is the driving force behind the corruption of Catholicism in and since Vatican II. But I'm sure you're right to. There's nothing liturgically authoritative about the content of the bidding prayers, is
I
there?
think I think they're an interruption.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and like I said last week, it's kind of embryonic synodality, isn't it?
It is. Are you going to be able to allowed to do them again? Did the parish priest notice who's the person in control?
Well, it's the bidding prayers. We're in control. It's not the priest. It shouldn't be anyway.
Good, good, good.
Would be my
Ex-
argument. But the only way they can stop me doing the bidding prayers is to remove me from the reading rota. And strange though this may seem, I'm one of the fittest people in that congregation. And there's a few of them that probably the ones who might replace me, I can't see them being able to get up to the lectern, to be honest. So
I mean,
not with
you qualify because you can walk up to the lectern, which
yeah,
in a bad day, given my motorbike accident, is sometimes
yeah.
more than I think I can do. But B, you're a
I,
very good reader, and
I couldn't,
isn't
I
it
could,
interesting the way in which good readers bring the thing to life?
yeah, I enjoy reading. I don't understand people who don't read it beforehand. Some of our lectors don't read before.
Oh, you're not serious.
Yeah, I'm serious. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
I
Well,
always make a point of going up just before the mass starts to read through the day's readings, just to kind of say this is my patch, and if anyone else thinks they're reading today, they've got another thing coming.
very good. I go more pretentious than
Like,
that. I try and
dog
memorize. I
territory.
try and memorize it and then deliver it as an oration. So
Oh, right, right.
it's very powerful. People they're really shocked when they realize you're looking at them and speaking to them. They
Yeah,
instead of switching off, they switch on and they go ah, and then this electric thing happens because the word is alive, and they're being addressed by it, and it's a bit like it's a bit like pinching St. Paul and preaching, letting him preach through you. But it can be very powerful. And the drama of the old covenant too. This after all,
no,
we don't when we
I love
tell
it.
stories, we don't read them out of a book. We grab people with our eyes, and then the narrative becomes mythically potent. We're so pathetic when it comes to understanding the power of our literature, I think, and the way in which we should dramatically use it in the liturgy.
Yes, I agree. I no, I love it when I mean we've been reading from Samuel recently, haven't we?
Yeah, it's very
So
powerful. Yeah.
exactly, there's all sorts going on there. It's like an episode of and you recount all this awful stuff, and then you say the word of the Lord. Everyone says thanks be to God. Well, there you
Yeah,
go.
I know. There's something
I love it.
cheeky in
It's like
that, isn't
It's like an AA meeting. It's like an AA
Yes.
meeting. When someone tells their tales of woe, and then someone else says that was a lovely, beautiful share. Especially
Do you think we
where
should?
you soiled your daughter's 21st. But not what will happen with me. But
That will be the response to
worst.
the new liturgical response to the word. That was a beautiful share. Thanks be to God.
Do you know? I actually not that long ago went into the confessional with the priest has left now, and luckily he didn't speak any English. But actually said, "I'm Sean. I'm an alcoholic." I forgot. I got the rooms mixed up. This was the same priest. This was the same priest who could speak. This was shortly after Francis died. I know we were supposed to be talking about Descartes, but I'll just say this quickly because it's quite funny. I've shared this on Voldemort, so at least I can share it here.
You certainly can.
I ended up, but it was just I was going up to do some sacristy work, and the priest appeared in the morning in the main body of the church. And I'm thinking, what are you doing here? Which shouldn't really be the normal response when a priest comes in. But
And also,
anyway, he was saying mass that day just for himself. He thought, but I was there, so he said, "Do you want to stay for mass?" And of course, you can't say no, can you? Not that I wanted to say no, but it got to the communion part, and he did the intinction thing, didn't he? He put the host in the communion wine and then offered it to me, which I can't take. You know, even
Of
though
course you can't. Oh, of course you can't.
even though that is the body and blood of
Oh,
Christ, it is the blood of Christ.
no,
It
no,
still
no,
has
you
the same
can't. No.
immanent causal properties.
Oh,
So, and I wouldn't mind, but if the priest had understood English, he would know from prior confessions that I am an alcoholic. So I don't know what he
yeah.
was playing at.
He
So
wasn't thinking.
I asked for a blessing instead, um, and he was okay with that.
Yeah.
But then afterwards he said, "Is there anything on your mind?"
Yes, yes. Decades of drunkenness.
So, so
Yes.
no, yeah. So I had to go into confession with him then, and it's like, "Bless me, Father, for I've sinned. It has been 24 hours since my previous confession, as it had been." So then I found myself kind of making up a confession, um, and
To
then I
get over
thought,
the fact that he'd made a mistake. How lovely.
"Yes, yeah, yeah."
That's
And
very
then
good.
I thought technically I should go back to confession to confess for making a false confession. But he left, so it didn't happen that way. Um,
Can I
so
tell you a joke about which you might think it's a racial
in
joke, but
general, I'm in favour of jokes, Gavin. Go for it.
it's not a racial joke, which some people will see it as. It's
No,
a joke
no.
from the it's a joke from a victim of auditorial impairment. That's me, because if you can't hear. So Vatican II, they said, let's have the liturgy in a vernacular so everyone can understand it, and then they sent us Indian priests
Oh,
because because they're very difficult to understand.
yes,
I
yeah.
mean, in fact, we have a wonderful one where we are, but actually, it's almost it almost requires too much effort. I mean, not that he's not a wonderful man and worth listening to. It's just like a wall of. It's like climbing one of those walls where there's not enough handholds. You can't get a grip on the vowels and consonants to get in there. Anyway, I thought it was a very good joke.
I felt terribly sorry for him, but he did that thing that we do when we go abroad as English people and started
He's
shouting. So
shouting. Yes, that's right.
he went fully in Paisley, and which wasn't really good.
Right.
But I said that last week, so I'm repeating myself.
This
But
is
anyway, I went to confession by mistake. It was very funny.
to have
Um,
to save
and
to
the
save him from
alcoholic
this
part of
mistake.
my brain was saying, if you're a genuine Catholic, you would take the wine because it's the blood of Christ. But I'd already written
No,
off.
no, no, no. I don't think so. I think that's thou shalt not tempt the Lord your God. You'd have to ask for miracle, and I think that comes into
I agree. And
tempting him.
my friend Roger Watson, who watches this, who's a Catholic writer amongst other things, says that intinction isn't really something that should happen. It shouldn't do that. I don't know if that's the
Oh,
case or not. Not being a cradle Catholic, but
I'm not a
I,
cradle Catholic, and I'm very grateful for it because I miss. But I miss the wine. But that's. Let's go to Descartes because we're on more solid ground with Descartes than we are we're on the theology of intinction.
yes, yeah. Although someone could put something in the comments if I'm wrong.
Yes, well, they can do that with Descartes too, but
I don't read
except
the comments, but I do glance at them as the American
well,
commentators
they,
mark out
they can
bits.
do that with Descartes too, except we won't be wrong.
Okay, no pressure there.
Right. Well, so let me throw the ball over the net so you can whack it back. So here's a very gentle serve. Um, as a non-technical philosopher, but someone who's only really done background reading, I didn't understand how dangerous Descartes was. I mean, I kept on picking up signals of people saying, beware. The phrase was Cartesian dualism, and it's really taken. It's only recently that I've understood or processed the information sufficiently to realize that what Descartes did was to move us and our recognition of authority from a sense of legitimate community and
Mm,
legitimate epistemological structure, e.g., the church,
mm,
to the interior of the solitary human being.
yes.
In other words, Descartes dislodges me from my membership of the Catholic Church by saying they don't know what they're talking about, but you do. And by the way, you're not body, soul, and mind integrated in a somatic and theological whole. You are, in fact, two bits, just two bits, and they're your thinking and they're your body. And the cleverer you are, the worse you are with your body. Intellectuals fall over and can't mend things, and the
Mm.
body's the body on the whole. We don't do ballet dancing, or we're not very beautiful walking down the street. The body, we're so much in our heads that the bodies are kind of added on extra. So Descartes is very dangerous for people who are exercising their mental muscle, because you live in your head much more than outside. And what we need is help in restoring us into our unitive mental, spiritual, and physical coherence, and relocating authority outside ourselves. Because who the heck are we to make the kind of judgments we make,
Mm.
just because it's not just cogito ergo sum, it's cogito ergo I'm a very important person and nobody matters more than me. There's a low flying ball over the net. I mean, a high flying ball over the net for you to put some spin on and whack back.
Okay, I'll give some context here. We were talking about the nature of cause and effect last week, what it is for one thing to cause another. And that got me thinking about Descartes. So I wrote a Substack piece a few days ago, which I think I sent to you, didn't I?
You did. It was brilliant. I'm
Talk,
doing the Voldemort thing. It was absolutely brilliant. Sean, you've no idea how brilliant it was. It was the most brilliant thing I've read ever.
well, it
It
was
was quite, it was
okay.
quite, it was quite good. It was quite good.
It was quite good. Sounded quite good. It was okay for a Substack piece, but all those errors that you quite rightly adumbrate that Descartes makes were not intentional ones. So let's rewind, and I think it would be helpful to do
Hang on.
some.
When you said not intentional ones, you mean he didn't intend them, or
No, I mean, he was attempting. His project was to rescue knowledge, or to reconfigure what we mean by knowledge in the wake of scientific advancements. Because he was writing. He's one of the architects of the Enlightenment. I mean, Descartes' dates are, I think, probably about 1595 to 1650, something like that. Um, so I think it would. And he's writing, so he's writing post all the traumas of the 1500s in the churches and all of that, and
yeah.
of course for the rise of the new scientific method. So what does it mean to know something in the light of all this? So that's a fairly noble project that he's embarking on. Let me do some
and
definitions.
and also and also rescuing us from an over heavy-handed and unaccountable authoritarianism. So it's one thing to say I'm a Catholic and I believe what the church tells me to,
Yeah.
but sometimes the church abuses its power, and you can understand people wanting to find some balancing mechanism.
Yes. Yes. Okay. I promise I'll get there. I promise I'll get there. But I
I
want
mean, not if
I
I go
want
on interrupting you.
I want to. No, that's fine. I want to define some terms though, because a
Okay.
couple of people did say to me about that Substack piece that they thought it was probably a good piece, but some of the words were not sufficiently defined. I think that's fair enough. Philosophers are like car mechanics and plumbers. We use language and assume that other people know what we're talking about, and probably we shouldn't do that. So and if people know what these terms mean, I really am not trying to patronize people, but here's what I mean by certain things that I'm going to say. By metaphysics, for example, we mean, as philosophers and theologians, those areas of knowledge which go literally beyond physics. So, and it doesn't just mean that physics comes to a halt and then you're doing metaphysics. It's about what assumptions undergird our physical sciences, if you like. What sorts of things have to be true in order for physics to work? And I sometimes use it interchangeably in a podcast like this with spirituality. So metaphysical physics and spiritual physics probably mean more or less the same thing. So that's metaphysics, hopefully. Ontology. What does ontology mean? For a philosopher, ontology is the study of being, of what things exist and what it means to exist. So in theology, your famous argument there is Anselm's ontological proof of the existence of God. I always thought that sounded a bit of a strange term, because surely all proofs for the existence of God are ontological proofs because they're proofs for the existence of God. But because of the way Anselm's argument is formulated, what does it mean to exist? His conclusion is, if this is what it means to exist, then God necessarily exists. So that's what ontology means in theology. As Descartes uses it, I'll get to Descartes in a minute. Epistemology is just theories of knowledge. How do we know certain things exist? How do we know certain things?
and, and,
Um,
and, the, and the authoritative structure we place them in.
sure, yeah. And teleology is the other one, which term which I might end up using a lot. Teleology basically just means design or purpose. Um, so, for example, a neo-Darwinian conception of life would hold that there is no teleology; that you've got um, uh, random
Well,
adaptation.
self-replication.
Yeah,
Random.
yeah. Order to no purpose.
Yeah,
Randomness is
yeah, yeah,
like,
yes, yes. Well, process is purpose.
yeah. Well, they don't think it is. Um,
I think they think it is. Do they really not think it is?
yeah, no, no. They think they can eliminate all reference to purpose, and the
Okay.
well, we can come on to that when we talk about causality. Let's see. Okay, so Descartes. Yeah, Descartes, as I say, writing around about the time of when the Enlightenment was embryonic, when the scientific uh, method was, as we know it now, was kind of being formed. And he is, as you suggest, a kind of Enlightenment Gnostic. Descartes' project was to firm up what you might call foundationalism. Foundationalism being the view that there are certain things we know for certain. We'll move away from the church telling us what those things are. Where do we go? Well, Descartes developed this method known as radical skepticism, whereby he thought I can only get to know those things that are certain by discounting all those things I can doubt. So famously, he says in the end that the only thing of which he can be certain is his own existence. So I think, therefore I am. On the basis of that, I can be certain. Leaves him with a problem. Where do you go from there? You know, that's a position that's very likely to collapse into something the philosophers called solipsism. How do you know other people exist, for example? And Descartes' wider project is to bring God back into it. Having eliminated, if you like, the authority of the church because of the scientific threat, he says we can know through reason that God exists. How? Well, I know I exist through this clearly and distinctly, as you and I might put it, self-evidently I exist, cogito ergo sum. Other things I know clearly and distinctly, I can say they exist as well. And his idea is to bring God back into it that way because he says he had a clear and distinct idea of God. Okay, as his system develops, he develops this position about the human person, which you've rightly alluded to, which is called substance dualism. So, the human person consists of two things. I'll use the word mind to take in consciousness and soul and everything else. So, mind and body. Res cogitans, we are a thinking thing, we are a thinking substance, but we also have embodiment.
Excuse
You
me.
have mind, you have body. The
A quick
question
moment of
then,
just a quick moment of clarification. Only clarification.
okay,
Would Descartes have allowed the soul to be a part of the mind bit you're defining? You
yes,
threw that in. He would have done.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
great.
Yes. And the reasons we were talking about this before we started recording, the reasons, for example, that animals would not have souls was because they don't have intellect, even if they have some measure of sensation. So yes, the soul bit would go with
With
the
the
mind.
intellect.
Yeah, mind is a very cluster. It's a cluster term that needs very careful disaggregation, but we'll just stick
Mm,
with mind for now. So you have two things: you have mind, you have body. So you have mind and matter. In our case, bodily matter.
mm,
Um, so the question then comes, well, okay, Descartes says we have mind and matter. He says these two things are ontologically distinct. So they're not just separate from each other, they are different kinds of being, they're different kinds of stuff. One of them's extended, the material part, the other isn't, it's just thought. So how can they possibly interact? Well, that is supposed to be the problem with, the main objection to Cartesian dualism is having set the question up that way. He has no way of bringing mind and body back together again in
mm,
any kind of harmonious sense.
mm,
It's like the mental self, the mind, and the body are just kind of accidentally or contingently together.
mm.
As the philosopher Gilbert Ryle said in the early, well, in the early part of the 20th century, it's the ghost in the machine stuff. For Descartes, the mind is a kind of ghost which just happens to be haunting this machinery of the human body. Now, the reason why I became interested in this was, or recently became interested in this, i.e., in the last week, is because of what we were talking about with the nature of causality. What Descartes has done there is basically give up on one idea of causality, which we're familiar with from Aristotle and then was repurposed by Aquinas, namely causality as sort of being the process through which what is potential is made actual. So contrast that with mechanistic causality, which is kind of the version of causality that we're familiar with today. Think of it as billiard ball causality.
Mm.
I think you put it very well last week when you said that sort of causality is defining basically a power relationship between
Mhm.
things. And I think that, not the separation of, not the substance dualism or the separation of mind and matter, it was Descartes' error that he moved away from a Thomistic or Aristotelian conception of final cause to this mechanistic one. And by the way, he allows final cause for minds. It can operate in the mental realm, but it can't operate in the world of material objects. And what is done by accident is made causality in the material world very difficult to understand. So
That, and that's what turns him into a Gnostic, or effectively turns him into a Gnostic.
he has, yes, that's absolutely right. You have this kind of dead stuff, if you like, called matter, which operates according to these very boring mechanistic causal principles, and this more magical, mysterious stuff called mind. And how they interact. I mean, Descartes had some very strange theories about how they managed to interact with each other, and they weren't coherent theories of the interaction. It's mysterious, but he's also made what matter is mysterious. He's hived off matter and mind, and it's not like science can then get to work with matter and explain what matter is, and the mind bit's the bit that's odd. Matter bit it comes to look a little bit odd.
So, if I may say so, he's made matter mysterious, but in the wrong way, because matter
Yes,
is mysterious.
yes,
But I mean, so to say he's made it mysterious is to suggest perhaps it's a mistake, but it's a particular kind of mistake, and it's a
it's
mistake that Protestantism will make much worse as it detaches, as it follows the implications of Descartes' billiard ball causality, and
mm,
begins to separate mind, rub out soul, and just concentrate on the causal effects that integrate physics or matter. And that's but by this means we begin to lose spirituality, soul, and
yes.
purpose, because as you quite rightly say, teleology is the key to keeping this thing clean and healthy.
Yeah, if I go back to the distinctions I made at the start, he has made matter mysterious epistemologically,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, but not but not physically.
but
Yeah,
but metaphysically, I'm happy. We would be happy as Catholics to say that there is a certain metaphysical mystery to material objects, because God's at work in them.
well,
God's
in
creating,
him,
recreating moment to moment, and that's kind of is a process we can't completely get our heads around. But the sort of mystery that Descartes introduces into the material world, it's not just that it makes it epistemologically unavailable; it's also boring. So it is Gnostic. Yeah. Mind good, matter not so good.
yeah, 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 absolutely.
And that's not the way Christians should be thinking about things. We should be thinking about. So in the Substack piece, I say rather than talk about causal interaction or causal relations, a better way to look at it would be causal intimacy. So to go back to what you were saying last week, Gavin, when you were saying that the kind of normal way of looking at causality is in terms of a process of power relations.
Mm.
The proper way to look at it, and the way that Descartes loses when he's talking about the material world, is as a kind of God speaking to us, if you like.
Mm.
There's a causal intimacy going on. There's a non-competitive presence of God who carries things through from one moment to the next, and that's what causation is. And ultimately, because it comes from God, it's rooted in love, not power.
That's the major distinction we keep on having to return back to, because part of the fall is that we want to set ourselves up as God, and that means exercising control. And so our favorite currency becomes control and power.
Mm,
And the one we find most difficult is the notion of surrender, because it implies contingency, and pride doesn't like contingency, and we suffer from pride. So the trouble is, because of the original sin, we're prone to misuse Cartesian causality.
yes, yeah. It's as I say, it's just a new version of the perennial era of Gnosticism. which you see in Plato, you see in the early church, and you see throughout the Enlightenment.
And presuming, speaking in a moment of deep humility, we would say that you gave him credit for recognizing there was a problem that needed solving, and then you quite rightly explained what the problem was and how he set about solving it. But as with so many people, the solution produces as many problems as the original thing he was trying to solve, and
Yeah,
that's what he's got us stuck with. And it just so do we think that this separation of mind and matter has some role to play in the scientific revolution? In other words, I mean, so on the one hand, you can say, as Tom Holland and lots of other people do, the reason science happened in a Christian civilization is because Christians, above all, were willing to trace causality back to God's intention and believed, therefore, there were rules that we could make use of, almost like magicians, but physical rather than metaphysical magicians. There was a way in which alchemy became chemistry.
yeah.
So, are we saying that because does Descartes give any extra impetus to the dislocation of matter from thought, turning us into a scientific and technological culture where the two lose touch?
Well, the simple answer to that is yes, because it's a natural consequence of what he says, that's the way things go.
Yeah, I'm just
And
trying to think whether he was causing, yeah, whether he was expressing something in parallel with it, or whether he partly caused it because of the power of the because of the power really of this rather splendid new way of looking at everything.
yes, I think what happened probably was that he kind of saw that what was going on within culture and science generally was going to prove a threat to the established church, so that God had to be defended in another way. But he lost control of the agenda, and other rationalist philosophers, and then the empiricist philosophers come along, and they run with that same notion of causality, and that's that's where the mistake is. That's once you give up on teleology, that error ramifies. Um, and you
I,
say Descartes' wrong, incidentally, even in the cogito ergo sum, even in the sense that he can't possibly know that with any absolute certainty, because basically he's thrown up the problem of personal identity there as if it's solved.
right, exactly. Whereas
I think therefore, right, well, who's the I? I mean, maybe you
yes,
can say
yeah.
at any given moment there's a thought,
Well, how
but
do I distinguish between the I in my dream and the I not in my dream? I
yeah,
mean,
exactly.
already there's the sub agenda of our own existence.
Mm.
Is what are we experiencing unconsciousness when we dream? I guess we have to say it is. Is it access? I mean, Jung would say it's access. It's the access to the unconscious. I think he'd say dreaming was the middle stage whereby consciousness and unconsciousness engaged together in some bizarre symbolic event. But anyway, be that as it may, because that's a whole other subject. What you're quite right. He's not establishing the an epistemologically verifiable explanation of our ontology. Because, as you say, where is the I?
Well, I'll put the point slightly differently. The If he's going to be honest about, I don't wish to accuse him of being dishonest. He's French. He can't help it to some extent. But I said
It's
that
the
out loud.
EU. Be careful.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, yeah, quite, yeah. But if he's going to apply consistently and right to the end this project of or this principle of radical skepticism, he can apply it to the cogito as well. There's no reason why it should
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Think,
Yeah.
therefore I am. You can interrogate that claim. It's not.
And one
It's
of
not
the
truth, for example.
that,
And his idea of clearness and distinctness, he knows this clearly and distinctly. Well, is that not begging the question? Who's knowing this clearly and
mm,
distinctly?
mm, mm, mm. It's a form of it's a form of the solipsism that he drives us
It's.
into.
I think what I say in the piece is that it's kind of it's a gateway to solipsism, which is a philosophical term for catatonia. You might as well just sit there and think all day, not worry about anything else. Um, and it makes mental states private, and that's philosophically questionable as well. I'm going to write, by the way, a follow-up piece to it because I think a lot of um, decent response or a decent response to all of this comes from another Frenchman who was writing, a French philosopher called Merleau-Ponty, who wrote in the first half of the 20th century. He was friends with Sartre and de Beauvoir. I think was not as good a writer as Sartre, but was a better philosopher than both of them. And he, in two books, one called, I think it's called The Structure of Behavior, and another more famous book called The Phenomenology of Perception, brought back the idea that your body is actually essential to your thought and that your body, in a sense, expresses thoughts. This is something I started to think about personally in 2024 when I think I mentioned before I was very, very sick. And I was in hospital for a long time and lost the power to walk, and had to have carers in a lot of the time. And gradually over time, the ability to walk and move around by myself came back to me. And it occurred to me that there's some truth in what Merleau-Ponty writes there, that if you lose the ability to move, then you lose the ability to engage meaningfully with the world in ways you're used to engaging with. It's difficult to explain, but
No, no, but the body is what saves us from from a
mm,
form of Gnostic independence. We're just a floating mind. I think this is really important because one of the ways in which the body reflects thought, of course, is the face. So
yeah,
the interesting thing is that after the age of 45, you get the face you deserve. And
mm,
before the age of 45, people are they're sort of covered or carried by their natural beauty. I mean, they the soul hasn't had time to imprint itself on the diminishing elasticity of the skin. But
mm,
after 45, it's really interesting to see how people's soul become expressed in their face. I think it's fascinating. I think that everyone before 45 has got this kind of anonymity where you have to look very, very carefully to see what kind of soul they've got. But after 45, it becomes terrifyingly clear.
the American comedian Greg Gutfeld says this is why very left-wing people who are very
Yeah,
angry are also very
yeah.
physically unattractive.
Yeah, that. I'm sure that's true. I'm sure that the whole left wing project, which is about greed, rage, selfishness, and above all envy,
Mm,
um, and the desire to lop off all the heads of the plants that really blooms. Whole business of being furious in education that clever people might be given the opportunity to flourish. They've all got to be reduced to the lowest common denominator. That profound envy that drives the destruction of the worst part of life. I'm sure that's true, but also I think that that's why I love nuns so much, because the luminosity of spirit, more in old nuns than young nuns, this is not an erotic thing. The luminosity of spirit in a woman who prays becomes so unbelievably attractive, as in
well,
just plain beautiful. You
it,
think,
it's set,
wow,
it's set out in the account of the Transfiguration as well, of course,
yes, yeah,
and
yeah,
in angelic interaction
yes.
in the Old Testament, and also when Christ visits the disciples post resurrection, he's bodily transformed, often in mysterious ways. So sometimes he's not even recognized. I mean, but what you're saying, I suppose, would be something like kind of an assertion or an argument that against Cartesian dualism, against a complete separation of mind and body, can be made empirically because it does seem to be the case that the body is a kind of distillation of what gets going on in the soul over
That
time.
I like distillation. I was going to use the word irradiated, but I mean we're looking for metaphors, aren't we, that explain this symbiotic interdependence of body.
Mm.
Because again, I mean, the soul gets wounded by the body. It's very hard to pray if you've got toothache. So I mean,
Yeah.
there's a that's where the sort of symbiotic interdependence comes on that side. But I think
Well,
and I think what's so beautiful about this is where I was going to try and get to this about 10 minutes ago, but I lost my train of thought a bit. What do Catholics bring to the trajectory of the Cartesian mistake? How can we begin to put it right? Well, we put it right by as you've just done, by promoting the body back again to the
mm,
same status as the soul. To say there's some kind of link we can't easily describe, but it matters. One of the ways we see it is, I suppose, in the incorruptibility of the saint's body.
Yes.
corruption loses its power over it. That's one thing. We see it with the perfumed presence of Our Lady, or the Padre Pio had this great perfume of sanctity about him. So there is, in fact, in Catholic theology and experience, a very beautiful uh, interdependence is the only word I can think of, that sees them as twinned, more than twinned. We don't have the word for it really, except ensouled, I suppose. No, that's not right either. And without it, though, of course, we suffer from the whole environmental crisis, because what we then do is we project onto matter the need to be saved in some kind of way, and we try and save the world instead of by greenery, instead of saving souls. That's
Mm.
particularly stupid when carbon dioxide is making the world so much of a greener place. However, I think to be a Catholic is to have to have some of the solutions to the implications of the Cartesian mistake.
Merleau-Ponty was a Catholic. I think the expression he uses is embodied intentionality. So let me
Mm,
just unpack that
mm,
slightly. Intentionality is another one of those technical terms that philosophers use, which means it doesn't mean doing something deliberately. It means the property of being directed towards something else. So philosophers of mind talk about this thing called intentionality of mental states, which just means that if you have a belief or a desire directed at something in the world, you believe that, fill in a proposition. You desire that, fill in the blank with a proposition. Daniel Dennett was a philosopher who famously said that there is no such thing as
mm.
intentionality. Merleau-Ponty says something quite different, which is that there is such a thing as intentionality, but it's a property of bodies as well as of minds. And if you've had something traumatic happen to you, lots of being able to move, even say a broken arm, which affects everything you do, you will realize that over time, your body has developed distinctive cognitive subsystems
Mm.
with intentional relations to the world, which may not be present to consciousness, but nevertheless have real meaningful content to them. So, Merleau-Ponty left his Catholicism behind when he became political. I don't know why, but he did. Probably the influence of Sartre and de Beauvoir didn't help. But that kind of Catholic strain of thought is very much in there in his writings. So he's someone I would heartily recommend. Also, I read a beautiful passage quoted in a relevant paper by Milan Kundera, where he talks about the relationship between walking and memory. And says, have you noticed if someone they're walking down the street and they're trying to remember something, they slow down. Without realizing it, they slow down.
Mm.
And then when they've remembered something that they're trying to forget, or would rather forget, they speed up. So that
You
wonderful
know,
comedy that friendship
it-
that exists between memory and I suppose mind in general, and the physical expression of that is something which would be invisible to a Cartesian account, but
that's really.
is essential to seeing the transcendent in the everyday, which is what we Catholics ought to be trying to do all the time.
And the other that's absolutely right. And the other thing, one of the other things that we're left with as an inheritance of the Cartesian mistake is the absence of soul. And have you read much Rupert Sheldrake, or do you know much about Sheldrake?
I was going to ask you about Sheldrake because I was thinking about because of a couple of things that have. I think you and I have talked off main, as it were. We've talked in private
Mm,
about
mm, mm.
supernatural, paranormal, and relationship.
We started doing this in private, and then said, "Well, maybe other people would like to join in." So that's when the privacy
Tell,
overflowed into the public.
tell 5 friends about us. We're doing that.
That's right. It's like,
The
not sure I've got five
grubby,
friends.
the grubby, the grubby transactional thing of trying to get more people watch. Anyway, sorry, but to answer your question, Sheldrake is someone who is on my list to read very much. But back to you about it.
Well, he's not a Catholic. In fact,
No,
I'm not sure he's a Christian. I taught his son at the university I taught at, and so he turned up occasionally to public lectures I arranged. I got to know him. I got him to give some public lectures. He's anathematized by the scientific community, who hate him because he's moved outside the whole sanctity of empirical verification. Well, no, he hasn't. He's using empirical verification to prove things they don't want to be true.
Yes, I don't
So
like it when that happens.
that's right. So one of the great experiments he did was on dogs and intuition, and it turned out he proved empirically that a dog would know when its owner was coming back long before any physical sensorial stimuli could inform it. So,
Mm.
in other words, you might say, well, what about how far do a dog's hearing and smell stretch? You know, 100 yards, 400 yards, 600 yards, 1,000 yards. Um, and so, extending it way beyond what was even possible, he did experiments whereby it was perfectly clear that the dog knew without any physical access to any information at all, and any material access, that, for example, its owner was on its way home. And therefore, he postulated some kind of, well, we're back to the Cartesian temptation. How do you solve the problem and not cause a bigger problem by finding the wrong language? So part of Sheldrake's difficulty is that he can't find, I don't think he can find, a language that replaces, if you like, what we would mean by spirit, or he doesn't have a coherent worldview that allows him to use the language safely. But essentially, what he's trying to do is to reintroduce metaphysics, which I think is predicated on the notion of the soul. And if you don't predicate on the notion of the soul, then you turn out to be a different kind of Gnostic, where you just you perhaps not quite such a bad Gnostic because you're allowing the material a bigger place than Descartes did. But essentially, what Sheldrake's trying to do is to do what he could easily discover as a Catholic by belief and faith, which is the interdependence and the integration of matter and this other stuff that for the moment we'll call spiritual or intuitive or soulful.
But what he has done is within the parameters of empirical verificationism, using their own protocols and
Yeah.
with their assumptions, demonstrated practical conclusions that point to something metaphysical and
Well, and they
something
hate him for that because
outside of that conceptual scheme.
it destroys the whole project of scientism. It says, for the last 300 years,
Mm.
everything you've wanted to prove, which is why Dawkins gets so cross, because he's just desperate to make sure that there isn't anything beyond the biological. Then who's that wonderful man? When I got him here, Meyer, Stephen Meyer, on the
Oh yeah,
great the great problem of the Dawkins and the biologists are fine, except they still, we're back to Anselm and also Aristotle. They still can't solve the first causality. You can do stuff with biology once you've got life in the petri tube, but
yes.
that enormous problem of how life got into the petri tube, which requires faith or a first cause, they can't
They,
deal with
they,
at all.
they resort to the methodology of the intellectual rascal and use computer modeling to prove
Yes.
how. But Meyer's very good because he started off as a geologist, I think, and then moved into philosophy from there. And I know you know this, but perhaps not everyone watching does. But he wrote a book called "The Signature of the Cell." The signature in the cell, is it signature in the? I can't remember anyway. But it's a kind of rehearsal for an intelligent design thesis, in which he points out quite rightly that you've got to forgive Darwin some stuff because when he was writing, there was absolutely no way that Darwin could have any knowledge of just how complex a single living cell is. Now
Well,
he thought
not
it's a
only that, but I mean,
it's a
if you sorry,
it's a galactic complexity what goes on in a single living cell. So I think one of the things Meyer says is that quite possibly Darwin himself wouldn't be a Darwinian if he was um,
So what they
right.
what they did was they turned his observations about evolution and of course they're terribly Nazi. I mean they're Nietzschean. They're all about Nietzschean power, survival of the fittest. I mean, put Darwinism into political terms, and you really, Hitler becomes a saint because he's one of the most successful advocates of the survival of the fittest, or the most ruthless, however you depend it. But put that's in brackets. But of course, Darwin's fine on the micro level of evolution, and what he describes in terms of variance
Mm,
biologically is absolutely true. It's when you
locally.
take the micro level or the limited level
Mm.
and you make it macro or universal, that it
Mm.
doesn't stretch that far. So it's a stretching of Darwin to cover everything that is a mistake. And you quite rightly said, Darwin would say, well, I'm absolutely right about evolution in a constrained way,
Mm.
but I don't provide a universalistic single explanation in the same way that there is no single explanation that allows us to put Einstein and quantum physics together. There
The
is no
book,
single explanation that allows evolution.
no, the book is called The Origin of Species, not The Origin of Life.
Yes, yes, good
They,
point. Yes, they should have read the title.
yeah. The American philosopher David Belinsky is good on this. I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but I've mentioned it to someone recently. He says, "Isn't it
Can
amazing?"
you talk while I go and put a log on the fire? I've got you in my ear, so I'll go on listening. But I just want to explain to the lead why I'm not leaving the conversation. I can still hear. Go on,
I'll
American
have to.
philosophy.
If you're too long, I'll have to start singing, and no one will like that.
I won't
No,
be too long. I'll be 30 seconds. But
no, okay. No, the American philosopher of science, no, mathematician and philosopher David Belinsky, talking about museums, says in the dinosaur section, isn't it amazing the amount of work or conceptual heavy lifting the arrows do?
yes,
But, by which obviously means that I mean he Belinsky and other people who write about this who are sympathetic to the defects of neo-Darwinism would say that it's very difficult to actually define what a species is in Darwinian terms because there's no essence there. It's an anti-essentialist metaphysical system or metaphysical theory. There's no
yes.
reason logically why a cow couldn't turn into, I don't know, a horse. Why not?
Well, but I
The
mean
right, the right
that's
ambient contingencies are in place. Then why not?
yeah, well, that's a great criticism of the Darwinian theory that there isn't this crossover. There is no evidence of the crossover of species that
That's
people
right.
assume must exist simply because we've made some kind of hominoid link between us and chimpanzees as cousins. So there's an assumption there's a family tree between all species, but the crossover links don't exist, and the fossil evidence isn't there. And that part of the problem of macro Darwinism is that it's not it doesn't rest on any fossil evidence. There isn't any. It's all assumption.
I think I got this right that the American Notre Dame philosopher Plantinga thinks that Darwinism is actually a defeater for scientific naturalism. Because, according to a Darwinian account, it might be useful for purposes of survival to pick up false beliefs, to believe things that aren't true,
Yes, yes,
including naturalism.
yes. I
Uh,
think that's probably right. Yeah.
and I wonder also, on a slightly more mischievous note, and maybe unworthy note, I mean, if such, you can be fairly sure that there's no such thing as a true intellectual Darwinism because Darwinism wouldn't have survived if there were, because it's a pretty
It's like the Darwin Awards on our telephones, which are really
it's kept alive. It's basically kept alive by credentialism and research grants, and,
yes, yes, yes.
and the ruthless elimination of dissent.
All that true. Now
They,
we've
they
done
were,
an hour. How have we done an
yeah,
hour? 52 minutes. Are we good for now, or should we extend this into migration?
migration.
Well,
Yes, extend
the
this into
GP,
migration because I wanted to. Can I do the intro for this bit?
yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah,
I was
yeah.
I was I was lying in bed. I go to bed quite early. I told Alexa to put GB News on, and I'm just drifting off, and I'm thinking, what the heck? That sounds awfully like my friend Gavin Ashenden in the background. And I was just about to turn over to Megyn Kelly on an American politics channel. But no, you came on and you basically, and I quite like Patrick Christie's, but you gave him a little bit of a very mild telling off, didn't you? And
I did. I
an
did.
entirely condign one, I think. But you can explain.
Well, he
Yes.
was Quran whipped. I mean,
Yeah, he was.
and he'd spent quite a long time explaining how the Muslims had ganged up on him and were besieging Ofcom with
That's right.
complaints about him, and that the complaints had been entirely manufactured. He didn't say it, but the implication was clearly that an Islamic activist had taken his voice and spliced it on to something that they didn't belong with, wrapped it up as if it was a GB News tweet, and then retweeted it making it appear that he'd said things that he actually never said about things he never intended to say anything about, and then getting a crowd to a mob together to write to Ofcom saying, "Look how offended we are by this bastard fascist racist broadcaster." And it didn't make, by the time he'd caught up and said, "But this wasn't a tweet from me, it wasn't from GB News, it had an entirely false origin, it was clearly a false flag operation," the damage was done. And of course, which is the difficulty. Anyway, so he was complaining a bit about this, and he then invited me on to comment about the capture of the Anglican bishops, who got very, very upset by the use of the St. George's flag in any other circumstances than Remembrance Sunday on a church steeple, which is allowed by the national church. But any other use of it was a form of nationalism that the national church thought was fascist. How the Church of England manages to justify its distinction by saying, if we do it, it's part of national church, but if it's anything else, it's a form of nationalism that verges on fascism. It's just intellectual spaghetti. It's so stupid to be called out. And so he then asked me for my opinion about the bishops. But as we did so, it involved having to talk about Quranic theology. And when I made a generalization, he then did the journalist thing. I'm sure there's another side to this. We must let the other side speak. You've said something extreme from one side. We can't let that go without allowing.
Or did he say something like, "Of course, most Muslims don't believe that"? Or
Yes, he did say that. Yes, I said.
that's when he leapt on him.
Yes, I said.
Figuratively, obviously.
I said, look, the intention of Islamic immigration from an Islamic point of view, and then I said something. I either intended to or did say something sophisticated, but it doesn't matter what it was. But he then translated it into very unhelpful language by saying, "Oh, you're talking about takeover." Actually, what I was really talking about was the desire for autonomy in demographically and democratically majority Islamic areas. That's different from a takeover, which sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it amounts to the same. It ends up by being the same thing. However, if you use the language of takeover, you then slip into dangerous territory because it sounds like something else. But it still gave me the opportunity to say to him, no, you must, and this applies to violence as well as to Islamic autonomy. Muslims who don't believe this, I can say that all Muslims believe this, or if they're Muslims who don't believe it, they're no longer good Muslims.
Yeah.
So allow me to say all good Muslims or all faithful Muslims believe this, because this is what the Quran and the Hadith teach. And what the Muslims do each time, and in fact, later on in that episode, there was an example of it. They got a Muslim Islamic lawyer on, and they say, "Well, you are saying these things about Islam. We deny them. It's not true that they deny them illegitimately, but this is how we deny them. Now prove from your knowledge of the Quran that my denial is invalid." And of course, the poor person has no knowledge of the Quran, doesn't know the Hadith, they've simply picked up an impression. For example, you would get the impression that Islam is violent because 90% of all the terrorist violence is Islamic. It's not an unreasonable connection to make. But if you're asked to prove it evidentially from the texts, you can't do it because you don't know the text. It's obvious, it's common sense, it's causality. But they get you by saying, well, chapter and verse, please. And then of course, the poor person who's got this perfectly legitimate impression stumbles. And because in our culture, you can do it. But the problem with the Quran is not only is it Arabic, but even in translation, it's utterly foreign to the way we think and speak. And it's difficult to organize. It doesn't make much sense. It contradicts itself. It's a nightmare to get your head around. And a lot of people don't do it partly because it's not worth the time and the trouble. The only person who's done it is Tommy Robinson, and actually he's very good at it. He's turned himself into an Islamic expert because he really has read it and organized it and understood it and can access the sources. But it's another reason why people hate him so much.
Here's what he could have said. He could have said, "I'm no Quranic expert, but
Yes.
my understanding is that Islam is mistaken about the nature of God's causal immanence, and that his notion of the notion of causality in play in Islam is one of power relations, not one of loving cooperation, like it
Yes,
is
but
in.
they would, what the Islamic way of arguing is to not deal with your attack, but to attack you instead and say something like, "Yes, but you are a polygamist." I don't mean a I mean a polytheist.
Words,
You're a
words.
poly, you're you're
I
a
told you to
yes.
keep
The
that
polygamy is
quiet.
good. Polytheism is bad.
Hearing from my
You're
lawyers.
you're a polytheist because you believe God has a son. God has children, and we believe in a proper God, not this
Well,
kind of. And
I'm
then you then start defending
well,
their
but it's
their aberrant understanding of the Holy Trinity, which
you
gets really
just drag
difficult.
them into a discussion of Trinitarian metaphysics. It's easy,
The,
but it may not be for GB News, admittedly.
actually, um, the trouble is the Islamic worldview is so utterly and completely mentally, philosophically different from the
Yes,
Christian worldview that
yes,
that it's like the deaf and the blind having a conversation. It's extremely difficult to do.
yes, it is. Yeah, but
Um,
I do think, with facetiousness aside, I do think that they do have incompatible views about the nature of causal necessity as deriving from two different conceptions of what God is.
yes, I think, but that's true. I mean, I suppose if we wanted to do this, we should really go back to start at the beginning and talk about how Allah and Yahweh
Mm.
are two entirely different gods. But perhaps we shouldn't set ourselves up as Islamic experts we're on a channel where we're trying to work within our credentials of the Western philosophy rather than
That's why.
Oriental or
Why I was trying
Oriental
to drag it back
monotheism.
into it. That's why I was trying to drag it back onto my turn. Can I,
Yes, no,
before?
you did. No, that's what you were doing. I'm so sorry. I resisted you, but you were doing exactly that. You were dragging it back to our area of competence, and
Yeah,
I saw that too late. Sorry. Well done. Thank you.
yeah. I will have. I will always return the burden of proof to people. But shall I tell you what I have to write about this week? Tell people what I've got to write about this
Go
week.
ahead.
I am going to write a piece called "Are There Nazis in Devices?" Let me explain. Without doxing myself, I live in a part of Devizes in Wiltshire where there is a stone's throw from where I'm sitting, a complex of social housing, which, when viewed from above, there's no kind way of putting this, Gavin, uh, is a swastika.
Right.
You can look this up online.
Yeah.
There have been
Yeah.
newspaper articles about it. Um, so that's kind of. I thought I might move away from theology and first
Would
order
you?
philosophy,
So
and
there is of course a technical word which I've forgotten. I'm embarrassed to say about the Hindu symbol from which the swastika is derived. So do we not think this is a piece of psycho-geographical Hindu architecture rather than a Germanic claim of supreme nationalism?
I'm not going to have any fun with that, though, am I?
well, you might do, but it's probably too sophisticated for your audience. And it depends who the audience is. Who are you writing it for?
I'm going to write it for my Substack, possibly for Country Squire, which is the magazine I kind of associate edit.
Right.
It would be mad enough to go there. I don't see the conservative woman taking it. I'm going to say that if there's the Nazis did manage to escape and seed offspring in this sleepy market town, they've moved away from an ideal Aryan paradigm because they're kind of overweight single mothers who smoke about 40 cigarettes a day, who are
I
going in
love
and out.
I'm used to the idea of Nazis slipping into South America because
But
it
not.
was because it was through the rejection of what was thought to be the Vatican's complicitness that
Mm,
my my Anglican continuum uh, friends got their Catholic orders as the bishop in Brazil called Duarte Costa
yes.
went independent because he was so cross because he thought the Vatican was aiding the Nazi rat run. So I'm used to them there. I'm used to them being let off any kind of hook of accountability because the Americans wanted them for the space race. But I'm not used to them having found sanctuary in devices and
It could
polluting
be.
the architectural.
It could just be tribute architecture. I don't know. Um, but it is that part of devices is twinned with a place in Germany. The architect was German, and it has been a matter of some local discussion for quite.
It sounds
But,
like it might really be tribute
but
architecture.
how?
How
I mean,
funny.
you've got to admire them because how did they get that through the planning application?
Well, they obviously didn't show the view from above.
No, no.
I think it's very funny. Well, it sounds to me to be much even more interesting than I thought it was when you first mentioned it. It's now becoming something that Miss Marples might need to get on and find the solution to. Anyway, we look forward to hearing what you do with it.
Yeah. No, I mentioned it because now I have to write it. It's like the bidding
No,
press thing.
and we
I
have to we
lots
have
of
to read
practice.
it. We have to read it, and we have to restack it. So this is going to be a really. It might find its way into the Daily Mail at this rate.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Secret Nazi sanctuary in devices.
Yeah. You never know. You never
Good.
know.
Well, as always, as a friend of mine says, it's been real. It's certain ontological circularity there, but it's been real. Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin.
Right. God bless all our listeners, and to those 12 of you who come with us, we're very grateful. It's really nice to have your company, and we love your comments. We really do. So thank you.
I haven't
Right.
read it.
I
I'm
have.
too scared to do that.
No. The comment. I used to. Well, I was like you once. I despised the comments, and then I realized that actually engaging in the comments allowed the whole enterprise to become rooted in communal solidarity and as a form of sociologically mutually enriched accountability that I thought was
Well,
a very good thing and saves
I'll
us.
tell you why I gave up. It's because I did have a glance at them last week, and someone had said, "Next time, can you have Damien Thompson on?" I thought, well, stuff you then.
But it was a sociologist. It was a sociologist, wanting to talk sociology because they weren't sufficiently well read to understand that the richness and the potentiality of our conversation.
That's why I wanted to do some clarification of terms at the start.
Well, my suspicion is that it was Damien himself operating under one of his many nom de plumes.
I know he's a strange guy. I didn't know he was that strange.
He is a strange guy. He's a very nice guy. I'm extremely fond of him. He hates me now for working with his enemy, the Catholic Herald, but he's a very nice man and very clever. But like most of us, he's much more strange than we let on. That probably includes you and me.
Except I'm willing to let on.
Yeah, well, that's that. I mean, it's it's a bit like confession. Once you've done that, there's nothing to hide anymore, which explains why there are no worry lines in your face. We're back
No.
to the interrelationship of body and soul. Anyway, we better stop this because it's been an hour. People
I'm
can't
sorry.
concentrate. They can't. Well, I'm just told they can't concentrate. They have to go do it in 2 bites, and that that makes it too difficult. So anyway, right. Well, next week, Nazis and devices. We want to hear the postscript.
Okay.
You've got to write it now.
I've started it. I
Good.
love writing on Substack because you can just save it and then go back to it, and then you can always. I always think this could be provisional, like the one I did last week, which I was reasonably happy with. The Descartes one. I think I might work that up into something a bit more first order and send it somewhere.
Good.
I might lose the Beatles reference.
Oh, I don't know. No, I thought that gave it its humanity. No, don't. I think Substack's wonderful. That's another story. We could talk about Substack. Just
Okay.
the fact that Substack is able to prioritize the written word in a period when everything is going visual and kind of the immediate sensuality of the impact of entertainment. It's so clever that it's giving life back to the written word. Right, better stop. God bless.
Okay. Is that going up today or tomorrow or?
Oh, don't. Well, that very much depends. Today, if possible, but let me not say what today is live, and then people won't know.
We're still live.
No, no, no. But I mean, if they, what I mean is, I don't mean live, do I? What I meant was the
I
people
th-
who assume that we're live, seeing it on another day, will say, "Look, he got it up today because this must have happened today." But it might have not.
okay,
I was using the word live in entirely the wrong context. Sorry. Um,
okay.
right. Well, I'll take my mistake of category elsewhere and say goodbye. And
Bye bye,
we,
Gavin. Take
we
care.
need to, oh, we ought to have, as we don't say how are you, but we say something more manageable. We should probably have a greeting. I think adieu is lovely, isn't it? To God with you. It's
Mm.
very yes. Au revoir is a bit over optimistic, but adieu is very good.
So, I thought that you was the one you said that when you weren't going to see them again.
No,
Oh,
is it?
yeah,
Oh, you mean instead of au revoir? Well, it probably is, but it doesn't. But I still think that it succeeds because of its metaphysical purity. To God with you, and we're back. We're back to teleology, and if teleology is the answer to all our mistakes, then adieu can't be bad.
okay. Adieu.
Adieu.
Okay, Gavin. I will speak to you soon.
God bless you. Bye bye.